Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call this meeting to order. If you'd join me with the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good morning, Mr. Chair.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the board meeting. And the very first thing that I'd like to look at is approval of the county board minutes.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Second.
The motion is second. Discussion. Hearing none. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That motion passes. I would look to Ms. Tabitha. Are there any additions or deletions?
Not at this time.
Or from the board? Hearing none, I'd look for a motion.
So move.
Second.
Discussion. Hearing none. Those in favor?
Aye.
That motion passes. And today we are blessed and honored to have with us a group from the vulnerable adult community talking about abuse and awareness. And I'm wondering if you have your presentation, if you'd come to the podium perhaps, and when we have that complete, if we could stick around for a photograph.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Vulnerable Adult Abuse Awareness and Prevention Proclamation, Morrison County, Minnesota. Whereas people who are elderly or have disabilities have contributed to the general welfare of Morrison County by helping to preserve customs, convictions, and traditions of many people from diverse backgrounds. And whereas these residents are vital and integral members of our society, and their wisdom and experience have enriched our lives. And whereas abuse of the elderly and people with disabilities in domestic and institutional settings is a widespread problem affecting hundreds of thousands of people across the country. And whereas suspected abuse was reported 165 times on Morrison County citizens who are elderly or have disabilities in 2017. And whereas abuse is grossly underreported because the vulnerable adult population who are being abused find it very difficult to tell anyone and are usually ashamed and sometimes afraid. And whereas abuse happens to men and women of all income levels, all cultures, and ethnic groups, whereas whether they are in good health or incapacitated in some way in neighborhoods and in rural areas. And whereas many of the cases investigated by Adult Protection in Morrison County involve self-neglect and financial exploitation, it is our duty as citizens to reach out to people in need. Now, therefore, we, the Commissioners of Morrison County, do hereby proclaim the month of May 2018 to be Vulnerable Adult Abuse Awareness and Prevention Month in Morrison County, and urge all citizens to work together to help reduce abuse and neglect of adults who are elderly or have disabilities. Thank you.
I'd look for a
Make a motion.
Second.
Discussion? Gentlemen?
Well, again, Mr. Chair, this is one of them that's kind of in the awareness for vulnerable adults is kind of put in the shadows, so this is something that, again, I appreciate that what you do for the disabled and the senior citizens out there, so thank you.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you
you.
very much, yes.
Thank you.
And without a doubt, it is the untold, unheard of, nobody talks about story. And I know Dana, and Dana, I wonder if you could have the rest of the people that are with you, if they could introduce themselves also, the team, because it certainly does take more than one person to make this work.
Right. And I'm Dana from St. Otto's Care Center Social Services.
Jody Luckin, Morrison County Social Services.
Sarah Pratt, Morrison County Social Services.
Jennifer Koenig, Adult Protection Investigator, Morrison County.
Bridget Yorick, Northern Pines Mental Health Services.
And again, thank you all very much. I wonder if we can take just a moment, if that would be proper.
After you vote.
Excuse me, thank you. We do have a motion on the table.
In a second.
And we have a second, and we've done discussion. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor?
Aye.
That motion passes. Then, I would ask if you folks would come up here, we would join you down here and have a photograph.
Actually, they should put the helmet behind us.
That's not going to work today, evidently.
You're the boss.
Oh, super.
Super.
Thank you. I look forward to visiting with you.
We're going to get right in the middle.
All right. I think on the outside, great. There you go. Well, I don't think it could get much better.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you for your work.
This is the one that has little.
And we have one more proclamation this morning, and that's the mental health awareness. I wonder if there's a group today here? You want to come to the podium also, perhaps?
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Carrie Zeck with the Mental Health Local Advisory Council, and this is our proclamation. Whereas mental illnesses are medical conditions that disrupt a person's thinking, feeling, mood, ability to relate to others, and daily functioning. Just as diabetes is a disorder of the pancreas, mental illnesses are medical conditions that often result in a diminished capacity for coping with the ordinary demands of life. And whereas mental illnesses can affect a person of any age, race, religion, or income. Mental illnesses are not the result of personal weakness, lack of character, or poor upbringing. And whereas, without treatment, the consequences of mental illness for the individual and society are staggering unemployment, substance abuse, homelessness, inappropriate incarceration, and death. And whereas mental illnesses are treatable with appropriate effective medication and a wide range of services tailored to the person's needs. Most people who live with serious mental illnesses can significantly reduce the impact of their symptoms on their life through treatment and services and find a satisfying measurement of achievement and independence. Whereas early identification and treatment is of vital importance. By ensuring access to the treatment and recovery supports that are proven effective and available across the continuum of care spectrum, recovery is accelerated and further harm related to the course of the illness is minimized. And now, therefore, we, the Commissioners of Morrison County, do hereby proclaim the month of May 2018 to be Mental Health Awareness Month in Morrison County and urge all citizens to work together to break the stigma of mental illness and provide our support to those suffering and recovering from mental illness. Thank you.
Thank you. Look for a motion.
So move.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Is there any discussion?
I'd just like to thank you for all the work you do. I think it is hard for people to understand sometimes what mental illness is, and I'd just like to thank you very much for all the work you do towards this.
Yep, thank you.
And I also am honored to be in a community where we can actually stand up and honor mental health awareness, have a proclamation made that we can honor that in a month, special, if you will. And again, it takes a team to do this. One person can't maintain and manage this whole thing, and it's bringing it to the forefront. I appreciate that very much, and I thank you. We have a motion and a second on the table. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion passes.
Here, would you want them to mention who they are?
Yes. Besides having you all introduce yourself, we're going to have a short presentation, I believe, as soon as we're completed here.
The report from our LAC.
And as soon as that's completed, then we'll have a photograph. But if we could introduce ourselves first, please.
I'm Carrie Zeck.
And please come to the podium.
Carrie Zeck.
Thank you.
Gerald Zeck.
Jeff Bowman, Morrison County.
Pam Allard, LAC representative. Pam Gruber.
Ryan Barnett, Lutheran Social Service.
Thank you very, very kindly. And then if you would continue with your report.
This is the local Local Advisory Council LAC Report 2018. LAC Mission Statement. The mission of the Morrison County Mental Health Local Advisory Council is to promote the health and welfare of consumers and family members of mental health services. We will accomplish this through community education by utilizing the voices of people impacted by mental health experiences, and will strive to identify needs of people who are and have been affected by mental health issues. LAC members. The members of the LAC include consumers, former consumers of mental health services, family members of adults with mental illnesses, community support services representatives, adult mental health professional, person representing a broad range of community interests in services providers, and Morrison County Social Services. LAC 2017 in review. Significant focus on building the membership and mission of the LAC back up to a strong operating LAC. Focused on identifying gaps and goal areas. Education. Oak Ridge Woodview Adult Rehabilitation Mental Health Services is providing 2 monthly support groups in the community at the local Morrison County Drop-In Center. QPR training to learn and recognize warning signs of suicide. Housing, LSS coming to the drop-in center the third Thursday of every month to help people fill out applications and secure housing. Housing resource guides available in the drop-in center also. Crisis intervention, provide information and materials to people on the new Region Warm Line and the new Text for Life. Advocated and followed the process on replacing the close crisis bed in Morrison County with the Safe Harbor Crisis Residential Services. LAC 2018 goals. Education, wellness fair booth to provide mental health information and resource information to the community. Mental health first aid training offered in May. 3 other trainings to be provided with topic ideas including PTSD, co-occurring disorder support, and empowerment. Housing. Greg and Rose from Oasis is providing training at the drop-in center on their services and homelessness. Crisis intervention. Crisis line, warm line prevention, presentation at the drop-in center. Collaboration. Morrison County LAC sends 2 members of the regional LAC quarterly meetings. Outreach. Provide drop-in center information and crisis support services magnets throughout the community.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Are there any questions from the board? Thank you very kindly. If we could take...
Why don't we do that one up here?
Yes, why don't we? Do you all want to come up here behind the board?
Let's all snuggle in here, should we?
Close.
Yeah.
It's going to be in the middle the whole day.
I will.
We need a middle person. We always need a middle person.
Mike, Greg.
I'm sorry, Greg.
Let's see if I
I'm
can.
going to have you slide down a little bit so that way everybody can Don't kill me. Don't, Mike.
Hands are here.
Okay, all right, we'll make it work. Well, you know what?
We need to slip over a little more?
I think, or maybe just hop around on the other side. Will you do that for me?
Walk around?
Yes, please.
Got to balance this out.
Yeah, balances things.
Yes. Balances it a little bit.
It's all a balancing act.
Yes, it is.
It is. Oh, my goodness. Excellent, thank you so much.
Thank you all very, very, very kindly. I appreciate it a lot.
Yep. Yep.
Have a good day.
You too.
Thank you.
Is there a security code or something for here?
Oh, geez, there's...
I don't know why, I mean, I don't know why I would have to put that in again now because,
I think it would connect us.
Is it wireless?
Yes, wireless. You're the one who came up the last time. You have memory.
To share the Wi-Fi
What's this
password
about?
for City Hall
Wi-Fi
with
password.
empty pad.
The word wireless, sorry.
So what do we do here with this? Yeah? Evidently not. Anyway, our next item of business is the Camp Ripley report. We've got the general and staff with us today. If you folks just want to come over here but to the chairs, that'd be just absolutely outstanding. And there's room for 3. I have no idea, General, that's up to you. If you want to bring the rest of the staff along.
Sure. I don't know if you got the opportunity to meet, but this is the CSM at Camp Ripley. This is Matt Erickson. Matt's been on board since March of last year. And so he's on his second iteration of community briefs. And we're kind of excited to come and talk to you about Camp Ripley and what's going to happen.
Well, we're excited to have you.
Excellent. So let me start a little bit by talking about me. I have a relationship with some of you, but I'm not sure that all of you know some of my background. So let me give you a little overview there. My name is Lowell Cruz. I've been a Minnesota National Guardsman. This year is my 29th year of service. In that 29 years, I spent the first 20 of it as a traditional guardsman because I owned a dairy farm in South Dakota. And so I milked cows and left them for my wife to milk when I went and served. And for about 18 years, we milked cows. And then in 2004, we got the opportunity, the Army thought, for me to go to Iraq. So I went to Iraq for a year, and that precipitated some life change for Amy and I, and part of that life change was coming to work full-time for the Minnesota National Guard. So I've been on the installation since 2006. Initially as the Director of Security, so I spent a lot of time working with Jeff, and the fire department was something that we stood up under my watch there. And then for the last 5 years, I've been the Director of Logistics for the Minnesota National Guard on base, so managing all the maintenance shops and all the personnel that work there. This last summer, I had the opportunity to get confirmed by the Senate to be a general officer, and so that was a good thing for me because I was nearing my mandatory retirement date, which would have been this next year. And so that gives me a new breath of life to work for the Minnesota National Guard for a few more years. And so I work for Major General John Jensen, who's our new tag, and he has 2 one-star generals that work for him, myself and General Mike Wickman. And so the decision was made that that position that I hold is normally positioned in St. Paul at the state headquarters, and the Minnesota National Guard is invested in putting a general officer at Camp Ripley, which is really the change there. And so I'm excited to come today and give the commissioners the 2018 Camp Ripley overview and where we're going and what we're doing. So if you go to the next slide, please, Deb. So my mission statement is, you've seen this dozens of times. So my predecessors, Colonel Weaver and Colonel St. Saver, this has been our standard mission. And my job is to provide facilities and equipment to first train the best soldiers we can to go fight and win our nation's wars, to have a state mission as well, which is to provide manpower to the governor in case of state emergencies for domestics operations, be it flood, fire, whatever. And then finally, the third part of my mission is to be the best community member that I can be. And so that's the heart of why I'm here today. It's part of my themes and messages that I bring back to you. And we are very excited about where we're at and where we're moving to in the future. Next slide. So I talked about it a little bit already. My boss is Major General John Jensen. He took over from Major General Rick Nash this fall. General Jensen was a former division commander as well of the 34th Infantry Division. You'll find him to be a very intelligent man that has spent his life doing planning. And so he can sniff out a bad plan in a heartbeat if you present him something that's not well staffed. And so I think as a whole that really continues to keep the Minnesota National Guard on its toes and looking forward to the future and doing some really good developmental planning. Talked a little bit about myself. I think it's a positive investment in the future of Camp Ripley to put a GO at Camp Ripley. What it's really done for us is it's allowed me to get some synergy of the 4 colonels that work there and try to continue that effort to not have it be 4 separate stovepipes of excellence and have it be one team working together. What changed, though, for the installation is when Scott St. Sauver retired, we replaced him with a traditional guardsman. So Colonel Brian Melton is a traditional guardsman in the role of the garrison commander, which is what's the role that St. Sauver held. And Brian is the county attorney in Clay County over in Moorhead, and will be very focused on running my M-Day traditional staff. So my responsibility is the day-to-day activities on the installation, and Brian is responsible for managing the people that run the installation. And then I've already introduced Matt. Matt is our new CSM last spring, and he comes to us on a 3-year tour, and he's an engineer from the Moorhead area as well. And so I'm excited to have his expertise working for me. Next slide, please. So just kind of an overview of our economic impact. Not a lot of change in the last 5 years. We hover around that $300 million level. And I would tell you that it changes from year to year basically on either the projects or the Army compatible use buffer line. And so this last year we we're able to secure $9 million of federal funding, which allowed us to continue to get willing landowner easements in the ACUB program, which is very important to me, and you'll see a separate slide on that coming forward. And then construction projects, we saw a lot of money flow in 2016 regarding some construction projects, and we've got some construction going on that I'll talk about as well. Next slide. So some of the accomplishments in 2017 for us, you'll look at our about almost 400,000 man days of military members coming to Camp Ripley to train, but what I'm really emphasizing is almost 62,000 man days of state and local agency civilians coming there to train. And that's really been the explosion at Camp Ripley, and is what's really turned us from being a seasonal operation to being a year-round busy kind of place. In August last year, we held a very complex exercise that the Army Reserve manages, and what was unique about that is we had about 5,000 soldiers at Fort McCoy and about 1,500 at Camp Ripley, and it was an exercise in training logistical units and moving logistics across time and space and the challenges associated with that. And then the other thing I wanted to note is we have an international effort going last year as well, and the fact that we sent one of our Armor Brigade combat team battalions to Lithuania as part of our effort to fight against the Russian influence. And so we rail loaded the whole battalion's worth of equipment out of Camp Ripley and shipped it to Europe, and they successfully showed that they could unload their equipment off a ship and get it to the border in Lithuania in 72 hours, which was a great achievement for the Guard and something that the active duty last year struggled to be able to do. So once again, our Minnesota work ethic and values push that forward. So next slide. Just kind of an update. I'm sure you've been briefed before about we had a little tornado that rolled through in 2016 that wrecked some buildings on Camp Ripley. But what it really did is it allowed us to secure almost $31 million of leftover MILCON funding to rebuild those buildings. And if you come to camp right now, the 4 largest buildings in that set are coming out of the ground right now, and it's going to be some great facilities that we're going to add and replace of what we lost. And so I tease about the fact that if I could get a tornado about every 3 years and steer it, it would really help me with my urban development on Camp Ripley as well. But we're very excited to get these buildings online, and they'll construct through the summer, and probably we'll be able to use them by next year. So next slide. Some other new construction, if you come to Ripley, we're starting to replace our rows of tin huts. These are examples of the buildings that we're building in Area 5 to replace a row of tin huts. And so kind of what we're calling them longhouses gives us the capacity of putting 100 soldiers in 5 different bays in that building. They're 3 seasonal, we call them, but we're really trying to extend the season in that footprint so that it runs from probably March through November. And so we'll take the hard winter off, but I'm really struggling with the increased demand to have enough beds for everybody. So the more facilities that I can create that extend that. And if you're interested in buying a tin hut, we just put the first 2 online on MinBid. So It's been a long time since we populated the community with tin huts, but we're going to try to do that again. So, next slide. Other projects that we're doing inside of Camp Ripley, we renovated the exterior of our historic Valhalla, the governor's cabin there. New siding, because of its significance, we spent a lot of money maintaining it in its current footprint. We also demoed a bunch of the World War II barracks on base. We only have 4 buildings left from the World War II era that we are continuing to maintain, and we demoed 4 of the large barracks buildings because of the tornado damage and the associated mold that we found once we started looking at trying to fix it. So, next slide. So I'm just going to start and go through our training schedule. We'll start with May. We're well into May, and as you can see the numbers, May is probably one of my busiest months for military training. We're just swamped with soldiers weekend to weekend throughout May, and there'll be some significant noise that starts in May here with both our artillery battalions and our armored units doing gunnery. And I would tell you other times I've come and given this brief that we've talked about periods of time where our air helicopters or our airplanes are flying more often, but I would tell you that it's constant. And so we are a constant noise generator from our C-130 wings as well as our helicopter training. Major events and highlights, we had the Disabled American Veteran Turkey Hunt last week. And so we had 31 disabled American veterans from the VA come and hunt turkeys, and they shot 14 turkeys for us. Bud Grant didn't get one, but Bob Lassard did, actually. So we were pretty excited to have both those old gentlemen join us again. And it was the first time I've been there when Bud asked to see if there were any World War II veterans in the crowd, that he was the only one remaining. So that generation continues to slip past us. Next slide. June is busy for us. It's busy in the fact that besides our units that are coming to train, we are hosting the Norwegians in June for our annual NOREX. It'll be our second time of doing a NOREX in the summer. And so the last 2 weeks of June, I'm sure we'll be pushing some protocol invites to some of you to join us to greet our Norwegian friends and once again reestablish those friendships that we have with that. The field artillery is up again in June, firing in various periods, and just a constant kind of noise generation throughout the summer. So, next slide. July is probably my slowest month, with the 4th of July being later in the week. That's really going to consume the first week there. And so we basically have 2 good weeks of training, in which it'll be the first annual training for the 151, as well as we start our period of hosting our teen and our youth camps at Camp Ripley, which are camps that are designed for our youth of our soldiers. And so we'll probably have 200-300 campers that come over a period of time there and get to see what their parents do when they come to Camp Ripley to train. Next slide. August, we ramp up the military training again with a good month of time to be able to do that. The 125 is up for their annual training, so another 2 weeks of 155 millimeter howitzers firing. And the State Patrol starts some of their, they do their youth camp as well then. And just as a note, we just started the DNR Conservation Officer Academy started here this last month, and that'll run through the summer. The State Patrol just graduated their academy here a week ago, so we constantly have that population training at the installation as well. So in the overview slide, I talked about the explosion of civilian training, and you'll start to see, up to this point, we've maybe had 1,000 to 1,500 civilians training on the installation in any given month. September and October are our largest months for civilian training. You'll see that, we've almost doubled the amount of civilians there in September, and that column there on the right of all the, September is really a month for our state and local police departments to come and do a lot of their in-service training. And so you'll see an explosion of training there, as well as our friends from Canada are going to come down and do some training as well. And if you didn't know, there's units in Canada that it's closer for them to come to Camp Ripley and train than to go to any of their Canadian facilities. So the units up by Thunder Bay come down to Camp Ripley to train. Next slide. And then probably the most significant explosion of civilian training, about 6,000 civilians in October. A lot of that is tied to the DOT snowplow driver training, as well as our hunt activity. We count the numbers that come for our bow hunts as well in that column. But very busy with civilians in October, and our military population decreases a little bit there. Next slide. I asked the team to put this slide in because I'm soliciting your help in continuing to educate the public about what our Air Force does at Camp Ripley. We have two C-130 wings in the state. One is a reserve wing, one's a National Guard wing. They're both based at the Minneapolis-St. Paul Airport. They are flying at Camp Ripley, I would say, probably 4 to 5 days a week out of 7. And the public's used to an airplane taking off and flying someplace and landing. They're not used to a swirling population of airplanes, and so we get noise complaints, but we get a lot of complaints from the public of just what these airplanes are doing circling around the base and things like that. And so, if you didn't know, we have a beautiful runway there, but we also have a dirt assault strip, which is very important to the Air National Guard or to the Air Force because it's one of the few in the inventory that allow C-130 units to come and train landing on a dirt strip similar to what they would have to experience in Afghanistan. And so we have C-130 wings that come from Texas, Arizona, California, Florida to come and do touch and goes on our dirt strip. And so it's a pretty important training apparatus for them, but it causes us to have a lot of planes swirling around in the pattern around Camp Ripley. And so as you engage your voters in that, please let them know that that's what's going on there. So next slide. We have 4 permanently stationed partners at Camp Ripley. The DNR, the State Patrol, HSEM, and MnDOT all have a permanent presence there. The DNR is in the middle of their academy right now, and the State Patrol just finished theirs. I'm excited about having them there on the installation. Not only do they lease facilities from me, but they help provide that emergency management, first responder response to active shooters and stuff like that. They are rolled into our response plan, and they're part of my law enforcement community on the installation. Next slide. And then in the next couple of slides, I want to talk about our environmental program. This one really highlights, it seems every year I can come and talk about some national DOD or Army level award our environmental team has won. I was notified a couple weeks ago that we'd won the Army Cultural Resources Protection Award for 2018. And what I was told a week ago is that we've actually won it at the DOD level. And so that's an award recognizing our efforts of maintaining our cultural resources, the Indian mound burial sites along the river, Old Fort Ripley, and all our efforts to culturally clear our training areas and that so that we know where there's culturally sensitive things and we're not disturbing them. And so just kind of an example of we are nationally known for our environmental programs, and because of that, we get a lot of attention and a lot of ability to try to give best practices to other installations, even active duty installations. And so that's really exciting. On the right-hand side there, those green energy kind of projects, so you're aware of the 60 acres of solar field that we got going there at Camp Ripley, but I would tell you our efforts to harvest geothermal energy is probably one of the unsung kind of environmental things we're doing. Every one of the new buildings we're putting in, we're putting in geothermal heating and cooling, and it's just continues to drive down our costs for maintaining all those large structures that we have. So pretty cool use of some technology there. Next slide. Along with our environmental programs, we've got a lot of environmental oversight, what I would call drivers of regulation, federal, state statutes, managed by the EPA and the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, federal and state executive orders, a ream of Army regulations, and all that drives a lot of environmental oversight. But I would tell you that we would never win all the accolades that you saw on the last slide without good cooperation and good environmental oversight as well. So, next slide. And finally, we couldn't do any of our success in our environmental programs without our partnerships. Especially, I want to highlight, I guess, the partnerships with the Minnesota State Colleges and Universities. Our Central Lakes College in Brainerd has got students at Ripley all the time. We're currently doing a deer study at Ripley where we've captured and collared deer, trying to understand their movement patterns in the cantonment area so I can try to figure out how to continue to keep them off the airfield without trying to build a fence, because those C-130s are rather concerned about hitting a deer, and I'm concerned about not creating any other structures that, really are waste my money where I could put them someplace else. And so those students are helping us track the deer now, and that'll hopefully give us a pattern of life that we can try to figure out how to interdict some of their movements. So. And then a lot of community outreach opportunities. We have our next open house in the September of 2019. That occurs every other year. A chance for the public to come and see what's changed at Camp Ripley in the last couple of years. We held that this last year in conjunction with Colonel St. Sauber's retirement. So those of you that participated in that, he misses the opportunity to talk to you, but he doesn't miss the job. He's out on his lake in South Dakota enjoying retirement and spent the winter in Florida. Along with a slew of other events where we're partnering with the community, Earth Day coming up here, as well as our chances to do the Christmas gift tag program and things like that are just all things that we're very excited about being a part of. And we already talked a little bit about our hunt opportunities for our disabled American veterans and soldiers. So we had in the plan this year to burn about almost 15,000 acres of Camp Ripley in the form of a prescribed burn. I would suggest about half of that burned as an opportunity based on training rather than deliberately set. But the good news is we're about where we need to be in our plan for burning, and which it surprises me because it started so late. But the firefighting crews at Camp Ripley have been busy the last 2 weeks fighting a lot of range fires. And the good news is none of those have gotten out of control or anything like that. So we're at the point now where we're down to just burning off areas that we're trying to interdict weeds and invasive species and things like that. So, and very proud of the firefighting team that we've got at Ripley and associated with that. So. Talked a little bit about ACUB already, but I would tell you that last year, once again, we were able to leverage around $11 million of resources to go out and continue to secure willing landowner easements around Ripley. And it's very important for me to do this because I'm very scared about encroachment. And I'm very concerned about concerned citizens building an effort and all of a sudden gaining some kind of noise ordinance or something like that that would interdict my ability to train. And so that's why the Army and the state of Minnesota, you'll see some money out of the Lessard Heritage Council as well, is very attuned with our efforts of trying to keep land in the condition that it's in and not have it be developed into some kind of housing piece. So especially on that upper northwest corner. One of the things we've done a little differently here, you'll see in the future, the original ACUB boundary was a 3-mile buffer boundary around Camp Ripley. We've done some terrain modeling to understand the noise contours coming out of Ripley, because obviously by noise pollution probably drives this the most. And so you'll see that boundary move back and forth a little bit around the edges of the camp, and that's due to the fact that we know that the noise contours are creating some areas where we probably need to pursue some more easements that are maybe outside of that 3-mile buffer. Next slide. Finally, just an example of some of the investment into the future. I didn't it kind of caught the base management by surprise, but one day we were tasked with coming out and helping site this infiltration basin, which sits on the north end of our base. And I didn't know how important it was at the time, but now that it's in place, we've got acres of motor pools on Ripley, and they all have storm sewers, and that runoff coming off with all that flat ground was going right in the storm sewers and going out into the Mississippi. This retention basin is an effort to capture all that rain and have it leach back into the aquifer, and to keep all the sediment that was going out with that water out of the Mississippi. And so we'll frequently have to come back and harvest the sediment out of this infiltration basin. But I would suggest that it's really going to improve some of the water quality that we're coming off of the Mississippi as well. So, and ladies, gentlemen, that's the heart of my presentation today. I thank you for the time you've given me, and I'll answer any questions you want to try to throw at me.
First of all, sir, thank you. Great presentation. It's always wonderful for me, and I'm going to speak on behalf of the board, to have you come and present this. It blows my mind every time that you do, or your predecessors have done, and coming here to tell us what really goes on at Camp Ripley. I refer to Camp Ripley as a unsung hero, as a crown jewel that nobody else has. We have that in Morrison County. Do I know anything about C-130s flying over my house? All the time. That's life. It's the military. It's what it is. Nobody forced me to live where I live. I chose to live where I live, and I'm very proud to be able to live where I live. And I have to thank you, your team, the soldiers, the entire military, for allowing me to live where I live and allowing me to hear the noise as it flies over my house. So I want to just thank you for everything that you guys are doing from the bottom of my heart. Gentlemen?
I would just like to say thank you, too, for everything that you do for our community. The economic impact that you give to Morrison County, Crow Wing County is, well, you've seen it. It's hundreds of millions of dollars, and it's very much appreciated.
I didn't work it in today's, but I talked about it last night to the city council a little bit. General Jensen's point of view is less risk averse than General Nash's. So one of the things you're going to see that we're currently working on is a joint powers agreement that's going to allow my fire department to be a little bit more responsive outside of my perimeter. Because General Jensen's point of view is mutual aid's mutual aid, and it needs to be a two-way street. So you're going to see that. I think the value just in that organization brings to the community is huge. I had Sheriff Larson take me aside and talk about the fact that when the local responders that are part of the Camp Ripley Fire Department respond from Piers or Little Falls or Randall, there's just a continued sense that, with the rest of the response crew, that there's people there that are maybe at a little higher level of experience or training. And I would suggest that comes from their full-time job at Ripley and how exciting that is. So if there's anything that I've been a part of since I came in 2006, helping stand up that for the community was huge in my opinion. So.
I thank you too. I thank you for being there. You provide a lot of jobs for the area, and I don't mind seeing your little huts going away. The new addition looks very nice, so just thank you for all you guys do.
Well, you buy a tin hut online right now for $50, so the bid may go up, but please. And in reality, no, that might cost you a little more. So. But in reality, yeah, we need some help even with that, because if I can figure out a good way of getting rid of them, it's way better than scrapping them. And it'll be value that comes back into either the state or the federal budget out of it. So,
General, and before you leave, and excuse me, but before you leave, we have a new commissioner on board, Commissioner Blaine, and I'm wondering if you would join us in a photograph opportunity. Sure. We don't get that opportunity a lot, General, to have a general here, so I would appreciate if you would.
Yeah.
That would be wonderful. That'd be wonderful.
That's a must.
Stand together.
We can all stand
Actually,
together.
he could stand in the front and he would still be, though.
We could all stand together, that's right.
probably a better idea.
General, it's a pleasure. I've heard nothing but great things about you, and
You get all the limelight.
it would be nice to meet another dairy farm.
Things are going smooth.
So,
Yeah.
good things. Good things. Thank you for being here.
Well, that's called 30 years of understanding how to balance a military career already. It's amazing. Yep. What do you want us? What on the agenda?
There you go.
There we go. That's gonna work.
I'm also a professional photographer. I don't know if you knew that, but.
Baseball mom over.
Thank you.
We do it all. Thanks.
Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Sir? Thank you. Appreciate it. See you.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
We're a military guy. You have
Yeah, sure.
If you were, I mean, out there.
All right. Our next item on the agenda is the airport. Did I see? Oh, I did see Greg. There he is. Good morning, Greg.
Good morning. How are you guys?
Wonderful. Thank you.
So this morning we're talking about the airport. We've touched on it a little bit before in regards to the crosswind runway. Now we're getting into the design services, so we're actually going to be putting pen to paper, planning how that runway is going to look, what the requirements are going to be as far as the pavement thickness, drainage, that sort of stuff. This morning I have a proposal in front of you in the amount of $190,676.81 from KLJ to do the design services. KLJ is our airport engineer out at the airport, and so we'd be looking for approval of that this morning. That will be charged to the Airport Improvement Fund, and we do have the funds available for that. There is a 90-10 split for this, so 10% would be local share, 5% or half of that would be state, the other would be city, county, so we're 95-5 split is really what we're looking at here.
And Mr. Chair, I just to clarify and make sure everybody's on the same page, I did talk to Greg before the meeting, and this plan does align with any interest that we might have in the solid waste facility with our landfill out there. So I just wanted to be assured of that and to assure you that the design work out there is aligning with our long-term plans and needs for the county. So, thanks.
Well, and this isn't news to us. This is something that we've been working on for a long time.
Yes.
And perhaps still has a long time to go.
Yes,
but I mean,
does.
we've been working on this for a long time, and this is not just to say, oh, look what we have, but we now will have, at the end of the day, more of an opportunity for not just Little Falls, but for Morrison County and the surrounding areas also.
That's correct, yes.
So I would look for a motion.
So move.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Further discussion? Hearing none. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion passes. Greg, thank you very kindly for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you guys for having me.
And our next item is to talk about the MnDOT land acquisition. I believe this is talking about property or land acquisition, if you will, around the government center with the Highway 27 project.
Mr. Chair, I've been working with Jeff from MnDOT and had some different easements, and he can kind of explain why this one's a little bit different and needs to come to board, but we've been working on ensuring that MnDOT has what they need to be able to do the road reconstruction. And so Jeff's here today to present that.
Good morning.
My name is Jeff Berg. I'm with Minnesota Department of Transportation out of Brainerd, and working on I'm a right-of-way agent, so I've been acquiring easements and permissions from the landowners along the proposed Broadway Trunk Highway 27 project coming up next year. There is a parcel affected, a county parcel affected. It's directly across from or north of the government center as parking lot area there at 3rd Street Northeast. Right in that quadrant, there's a drainage structure, and then its configuration needs to be adjusted a little bit so we can put in American Disabilities Act conforming sidewalks in that area and a new crossing, a new truncated dome ramp off that sidewalk. So what's been proposed, I don't know, well, I guess it's right up here. The acquisition includes two parts. This part here, smaller triangular spot, is something that we want to or need to put into permanent highway easement so that we can put in the structures and control that drainage and the sidewalk itself. The blue line, I tend to call the, well, it's called the construction limit line, but I call it the shovel line. And that's what the computer proposes that it needs to move dirt at. Well, the computer's not going to be holding the shovel.
Right.
So we have to have a little bit extra room with the temporary easement just for the construction and period. And so that will expire at the latest December 1st, 2024, like all the rest of the temporary easements we're requiring on this project, and or at a previous commissioner announced date. So looking at that temporary easement and that permanent easement. We proposed, did evaluation on it by a staff appraiser, and it came in at $1,100 for that acquisition of permanent and temporary easement.
So, Mr. Chair, that's what I need approval on. I can enter into easements for the temporary construction, but when it comes to permanently transferring property, I need you as a board to act on that. I double-checked with our county engineer just to make sure this is all in alignment, and he said, yes, this is what needs to be done in order for that construction to happen. It's something we, if it was a county road, would also be engaged in terms of making that happen. And so Jeff and I have been working on that. He's helped review that, and we move forward with a recommendation to approve.
I would look for a motion.
So move, Mr. Chair.
Second.
Discussion on anything.
Well, again, this is kind of, is the state of Minnesota planning putting a lighted crosswalk in there, and that has nothing to do with this?
You know, I can't answer that. I'm not part of the design or planning committees. So.
But what I can tell you, if you're interested in hearing
Greg
that.
would have a better idea.
I've been working with Greg Kimmen, actually, on some different options for safety for that crossing area with the parking lot that was established on the other side and just general traffic. A crosswalk with lights or those types of added safety measures would be a cost that would be incurred by local jurisdictions more so than it would be for MnDOT. But one thing we are looking at, and that might be something we move towards as the discussions move forward, but one thing that we were working with MnDOT and trying to design is a bump out. Part of what the issue is that traffic blocks people that are going and wanting to cross. And so it's not as bad on the other side because there's that open intersection, but on the side right in front of the government center on the north side, when those doors are out there, we've painted that. The city's painted that, or MnDOT's painted that curb to, prohibit parking, but people still have a tendency to park there. And so they're sneaking kind of between the vehicles, causing it to be a little less visible. And so one thing we're going to look at is a bump out and have it so cars cannot park there, and keep that a little bit more open so folks that are driving can see those pedestrians approaching the crosswalk. I'm trying that approach through construction and during construction to see if that can help manage that safety concern. So that's one thing we're looking at. More to come on it.
And I believe, Jeff, you started out with, this is the ADA requirement.
Right.
I totally support that. This is just exactly what needs to be done. And quite honestly, you're here today as well, this is what you do for a living. I got it. But this is something that we have to do. And anytime that you make an improvement, we have to continue to stay with local state, federal law. And ADA is something that this board has continued to support continually, and why wouldn't we? So, anyway, further discussion? Hearing none. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion passes. Jeff, thank you very kindly for your time. I appreciate it a lot.
Thank you.
Jeff, do you need an original back?
Pardon me?
Do you need an original back for that agreement?
Still, I didn't.
Do you need an original copy, an original signature back to that?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
You have the forms.
All right, we'll get it back to you.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Next item, social services. Good morning.
Good morning. So I'm acting as three people today, so I will be up here for a while.
Well, why don't you have a seat?
You can take a seat.
Sarah?
Okay.
It's more comfortable.
That would be perfect. As you can tell by the shoes.
I like them, there's no objection.
And I'll make sure to clarify who I'm acting on as I move forward. So
Fantastic. And for the record, because you're not Brad,
I am Sarah Pratt from
Thank you, Sarah.
Social Services and Public Health. So
I'm getting there, thank you. Oh, this was the LAC.
Mm-hmm.
I have that one. All right. Is this it?
So this is a report for adult mental health, which is a program that Penny Pesta supervises for social services. So I am doing this report on behalf of her. She drafted this report. I am just giving it. So as we know, adult mental health is an important service to our community. It holds the mental health system together, has a positive impact on psychiatric symptoms, as we can tell through the data. So the first graph shows our statistics, and as you can tell, throughout the years, our cases have increased dramatically, especially in 2017. And side note, I was a case manager in 2017, so I know what those numbers are like. So very, very high numbers, very difficult cases, very high number of commitments in 2017. We have 3.7 staff assigned to provide adult mental health case management, which allows for 148 combined active and assessment cases. State statute identifies one full FTE to be about 30 cases. I can tell you our case managers run about over 40 right now. So we're high, but as we move through, you can tell the great work that they're doing. So due to this significant increase, Morrison County has reviewed cases and partnered with Northern Pines Mental Health Center, who is one of 6 agencies in Minnesota that are piloting the CCBHC model of services for individuals with co-occurring diagnoses of mental health and chemical dependency. This model of service includes case management as one of the services. So Region 5, the Adult Mental Health Initiative, is partnering with Northern Pines for different kinds of case management services. One of them being RN case management. You know, if a person with mental health has co-occurring medical diagnoses, we are looking at whether it's more appropriate for that RN case manager to manage that case. So that's helping a lot, as well as the BHH and CCBHC. Civil commitments, as I said, there are 12 individuals on civil commitment right now. This has stabilized from an increase in commitments this past fall. Morrison County Social Services and the county attorney and CHI are meeting quarterly to partner and collaborate for the smoothest commitment process.
So, Mr. Chair, Sarah, that's civil commitment is where we've identified that they have to be in a certain situation or a home or something like that? Or
Civil
what is
commitment is where we will get an examiner's statement from a physician, or a family will petition the court asking that we, as social services and as the court system, provide services to that individual because they're unwilling or unable to do that themselves.
Okay. All right, thanks.
So the next slide shows revenue, and as you can tell, our revenue has increased with the number of cases that we have, which is what we would expect to see. We continue to see increased revenue despite reduced targeted case management that comes from the federal government. So despite the fact that that's been reduced, we are seeing increased revenue, which is absolutely fantastic, which means our case managers are getting out there, doing their jobs, doing their visits, which with high caseloads is extremely difficult, but they're doing it. So those rates are updated July of every year, and as you can tell through, 2016, 2017, what the numbers were for that. The other thing to know about that is we're only capturing partial revenue for clients that are on waivered services. So we count though, we get, if a client qualifies for the waiver, we get money for those waivered services. Waivered services meaning, assisted livings, group homes, services in the home that are above and beyond MA. So we do not receive targeted case management revenue for those cases. We only receive those waivered dollars, despite the fact that we treat them as a typical adult mental health case, which means we see them more often than required. I do know that's something Penny's looking at on should we divide those cases out, but with the amount of staff that we have, this is the best we can do right now.
Sarah, if I can interrupt you for just a second. Those waiver dollars that you talk about, are they local, state, or federal dollars? Do you know? And if you don't know, that's fine. I'm just asking.
They're not local. I believe they are state.
Okay, very good. Thank you very kindly.
Let's see. So, on to the next. So the next one is the CSP grant. This is a grant that we get, and we were granted $659,494 for 2017-2018. As of March 1st, we spent about $270,000. As you can know, we have the drop-in center in town. We had 3,352 visits by 147 different people. So that drop-in center is seeing some business, which is really great. I know that was a goal of Penny's to increase that, and so we're seeing that happen. Supported employment reductions due to increased use of IPS services, which are grant funded. Supported employment reductions also due to increased waiver availability. Case management numbers show that there are more individuals receiving case management that are not insured than what was expected. So there's currently 33 people that are not on health insurance that are being serviced through mental health case management. 12 are on medical assistance, 68 are on South Country Health Alliance.
Do you mind if I ask another question? Of the 3,300 people that have stopped into the drop-in center, there's 147 different people. Do you have any way of tracking, or probably not, probably can't, where these people are from? I'm anticipating that they're not all from the city of Little Falls, that they probably are community members.
Right. They're from all over the community. I'm not sure if it's being tracked, but I do know it's available to everyone in Morrison County.
Okay, very good.
Yep.
That's what I was looking for. It's available to anyone and everyone.
Correct.
Mr. Chair, on those 33, are they maybe eligible for MA, and then is it possible that you would sign them up, or that they just are not eligible for any medical care?
Typically, if they are on case management, that's the first goal of ours, is to ensure that they're insured.
Right.
Yeah. So most often they don't qualify, they're on other reasons, but that is the main goal, is to ensure they're on insurance. So many different reasons for why not, I suppose.
Thank you.
So Penny conducted a case management survey to kind of see what people thought about the services that we provide. And as you can tell, they thought very highly of the services that they're getting from the case management. Helpfulness, extremely, was at 26. Feeling that their case manager understands them very well at 23. Case manager meeting needs, all needs met at 26. Prompt call return, 26, which I think is very good with our high caseloads and how many calls the fact that we're being prompt on that speaks volumes. The other one talks about the top three most helpful services. So these are all the services that we can provide through mental health case management. And again, ARMS being the highest, transportation and case management as being the most helpful.
Mr. Chair, I do think that that speaks volumes, because these folks in the adult side and, child protect, everywhere, the social workers right now are very taxed. It's very busy. Programs are changing. There's always new stuff that's happening, more requirements that are imposed upon all of them. And so continuing to see good results and capturing some of the feedback from those that we serve is nice to see. So,
and Mr. Chair, I was thinking about your question about the waiver, and I do believe it's federal money now that I'm thinking about it.
Okay.
I think it is. Yep.
I made a mistake there, and I could tell by Deb's face. So I was like,
I really didn't mean to put you on the spot. I know you're not. That's
so I
not
thought I would
necessarily.
correct that for you.
Very
That's
good.
okay.
Not a
Not gonna
problem.
change.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So barriers to accessing services, wait lists, transportation issues, insurance issues, availability of a case manager. Penny has worked really hard on ensuring that cases are assigned as we receive them and making sure there are no waiting lists, which is extremely difficult with the high caseloads. But the fact that we're able to turn them over and get people going is huge. We just assigned out 4 this week. So we try really hard to make sure people are not waiting. Other adult mental health updates, county cost shares for clients that do not meet medical criteria but remain in facilities. So we still have people that are in Anoka Regional Treatment Center. That's being reduced as we try to keep people in least restrictive, but sometimes it's necessary. So as you see, that number is reducing. CBHHs, a lot of times for those commitments and people that are needing those kind of services. And then the Rule 20s, restore for competency, none in 17, and you can see where the numbers are in 18. So the other thing that's new is Region 5 has received a DHS grant, which will fund a regional transition specialist to attend to people discharging from treatment facilities, as well as a social work jail coordinator position. So Crow Wing County is currently in process of piloting this position and the yellow line principles of diverting people with mental health services to services instead of booking them into jail. So Region 5 and Adult Mental Health Initiative is writing proposal for the innovation grant to cover the training, equipment, and staffing to extend the pilot region-wide. The other program that we have through South Country Health Alliance, which is extremely helpful, is in order to be on adult mental health case management, you have to have a qualifying diagnosis of serious and persistent mental illness, which means 4 diagnoses: major depression, bipolar, schizophrenia, and I knew I was going to forget the last one, major depression, bipolar, schizophrenia, borderline, I believe. And so sometimes there's people that are in that gap that need services or don't have a current assessment that qualifies them. So if they're on South Country, there's a Healthy Pathways program that will help provide services to fill that gap, so which is extremely helpful. And then the DHS Case Management Redesign Policy Team. I know Penny's a member of that, trying to determine what case management should look like throughout the state.
Very good, Sarah. Thank you very kindly. That's a wonderful report. Being put on the spot to give it.
Yes, as of yesterday.
Well, perfectly done.
So second verse.
Turn your hat.
You're on.
Right. So this is the Vulnerable Adult Report, and I am the supervisor for adult protection and vulnerable adults, just for clarification purposes. So vulnerable adults, what makes a person a vulnerable adult is the first part of that, and that is based on whether or not they are categorical or functional. Categorical is they receive a service that qualifies them by statute to be a vulnerable adult, and most of those are licensed services within their home or they're living in a facility. The other one is functional, so regardless of where they live or what type of service they receive, they possess a physical or mental infirmity or other physical, mental, or emotional dysfunction that impairs their ability to care for themselves, including food, shelter, clothing, health care, and supervision. And because of the person's impaired functioning, the need for care or assistance for their health, safety, welfare, or maintenance, the adult is unable to protect him or herself from maltreatment. So those are the 2 different categories that qualify you as a vulnerable adult. And then the next part talks about what is the maltreatment criteria. There's physical abuse, emotional, sexual, neglect by caretaker, self-neglect, and financial exploitation. I would say our highest two are self-neglect and financial exploitation, unfortunately. So the MARC system, which I'm sure you guys have heard about in previous years, is the Minnesota Adult Abuse Reporting Center, which went into effect July 1st of 2015. We continue to see improvements in the quality of the reports that we receive from MARC. Previously, all those reports went through our intake department locally in the county. So now all reports are going throughout the state are going through this reporting center and then being sent to us for screening. So it has caused some challenges because when the intake worker took the reports, they were able to ask clarifying questions and gather information and do all of those things. Well, that reporting center does not do that. They take the information and that is it. So information has been lacking in the last few years. We're starting to see improvements, but still a work in progress.
So, Mr. Chair, if I could, that's, if I'm understanding it correctly, that's where, say, a constituent would raise questions about who do I talk to if I'm suspecting something of a neighbor, a friend, a relative, or something along those lines. It's directing them to the state, telephone, the state system that the report needs to go to. And it has been a work in progress in terms of it's caused an uptick in the amount of cases that we get and have to do a little bit more digging into because their methods are different than what ours were. Their limitations maybe would be different than what ours were. But it is a system that hopefully can get some bugs worked out and work as intended moving forward.
As the intake worker, like I said, they're able to, they were able to ask those questions. Once we receive a report as a screening team, by statute, the only person we can call to clarify is that reporter. So that tends to cause some issues if, to gather information. And depending on if we can get a hold of that reporter, we're in timelines, and so it just becomes difficult. So besides the change of MARC and the reason for seeing increased in reports, once it's screened in for an assessment, we've seen, when we're screening in our screening team, we have a structured decision-making tool that we utilize to determine whether or not it should be a screened-in report. So we have a tool in front of us that is helping us determine, are they a vulnerable adult? Are they being mistreated? So there's a tool that the state is required of us to fill out every time we receive a report. Once it's screened in, then we have a safety assessment tool, a strengths and needs assessment tool, and a safety plan are required to be completed on all those investigations. These new documentation requirements have increased the amount of staff time needed to complete an investigation. Currently, Morrison County has 0.3 FTE for adult protection, which I can tell you is not a lot compared to the rest of the state.
Sarah, is this one of those situations where the laws have maybe changed just a little bit to where if the sheriff's office gets a call at whatever time after hours, that a social worker needs to be notified sooner than later? And what I mean sooner is probably right away? Or can you wait a period of time before you take a look at that report? It's late Friday night or early Saturday morning. You're historically not in your office, but nonetheless, there's been a report generated. Can you wait until Monday, or will you be asked to respond to that?
Not for adult protection. It is not there yet, unlike child protection.
Okay.
There are emergency protective services in place for adult protection, but not over the weekend or after hours.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
In 2018, there's new performance measures to ensure that vulnerable adults with a substantiated or inclusive maltreatment allegation do not experience a subsequent maltreatment allegation within 6 months. So the threshold for this measure is 80%, high performance is 95%. If DHS sees counties go below the 80%, we will have a performance improvement plan unless there's significant or insufficient documentation showing the county took appropriate steps and repeat reports are not due to insufficient efforts. So this is new. Adult protection is way behind the child protection system, and it has some catch up to do, and I think part of this new performance measurement is doing that, trying to catch us up with child protection.
Yeah, okay.
So, like I said, screening team continues to utilize prioritization guidelines during the screening process. That is a document that we created. You know, the Minnesota statute has screening guidelines for adult protection, but you can make prioritization guidelines specific to your county. And that is something we had brought to board a couple of years ago, you guys had approved. And so we continue to utilize those. And we have our community adult protection meetings, which you saw a lot of those members here today. They're comprised of law enforcement, social services, public health, and we meet monthly to review screened out reports, training opportunities, and consultation. Our hope is to increase our participation and encourage case consultation. So I talked a little bit about this already, but on page 3, the number of reports were the highest in 2016. This may be directly related to the first full year of MARC and the new SDM screening tool. 2017 numbers were also significantly higher than before the implementation of MARC. 2018 on track to produce similar numbers. Number of reports screened in more than doubled from 2015 to 2016. In 2017, screened-in reports were down 7% from 16. This is most likely a result of improvements in the quality of reports received by MARC. Number of allegations found to be false has dropped slightly from 16 to 17, potentially, again, due to the improvements of MARC. We continue to give feedback to the state when we see issues with the MARC system. And then you can see our screen out rate. Now, the screened out rate is high for adult protection. And there's many reasons for that. One of them, you know, has been MARC recently. The second reason is to be a vulnerable adult, you have to meet those criteria. It's not like child protection where all kids are vulnerable no matter what. You don't have to determine that status for kids. You do for adults. And unless they meet those criteria, adults are able to live the way that they choose to. So we do see a high number of reports, and a lot of them are screened out. However, I would like to see more reports than not enough, because that means people are reporting, and then we can make the decision on whether they meet that criteria. So that's just something I'm kind of looking at a little bit more is our screened out rate, but I feel like it's on track at this point. Next graph is just our allegation summary. So once it's screened in for investigation, what happens with that allegation? You can see in 17, we substantiated 7 were inconclusive, 16 were false, 7 is where the investigation was impossible, 2 of them, they were not a VA or a vulnerable adult, and we have some pending.
Excellent. Questions?
I think so. Good job.
I think you have another item.
Yes. So this is on behalf of Brad. He had taken this topic to planning, I believe, so I think you guys are aware of this. I just need this situation approved, and I'm hoping you have a lot of information on it because I have very little.
Yeah, that's the item that we talked about last week regarding, Sarah alluded to it in Penny's report about the Yellow Line project and about the Region 5 counties pooling together to look to try to combat mental health issues, which we all know are substantial and ever challenging. And so in an effort to do that, they were looking for some initial startup funding to be able to get that program rolling. And it's a diversion program when it comes to mental health and incarceration.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Discussion, gentlemen. I think it's a positive thing. Hearing no discussion, those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion passes. Thank you very kindly. And Sarah, one more.
This is actually Teresa, and I think
Oh,
I'm back
excuse
up.
me. You're done. Thank you
For a
very
minute.
kindly.
Thank you very much.
Public health comes in.
You can, right there's fine.
Good morning.
Good morning, Teresa.
I'm Teresa Stout. I'm here on behalf of Brad. So Brad has many different faces today.
Yes, he has.
Excuse me. What we are here today for is to seek approval for a bit of software as we continue to look at ways to increase our efficiencies in the social service department. One of those ways is to establish a file transfer protocol, and that is where we could download our existing files, our case files that need to go. So we have someone who lives in Morrison County and they've moved to Stearns County. So we have to send our information to Stearns County. Years ago it was we put it in a box and we taped it all up and sent it. Now we are burning those files to a CD, putting it in encrypting that CD, putting it in an envelope and mailing it. So the next step in creating the efficiency is to develop this FTP site, which we've worked with our IT department on, so we can put those files out on this FTP site, and the other county can go to that same site and grab the file. So each county can only see the files that we put out there for them. They're all encrypted. They have their password that we have assigned to them to go in and retrieve that file. So we presently spend right around $1,000 a year with the disks and mailing them out. So we would be saving that money. So we're seeking approval, I believe, not to exceed $2,500 to come out of the fund balance.
I'd look for a motion.
Also move, Mr. Chair.
I'll second.
Discussion.
We discussed this at our last planning meeting. It's just an easier way of doing something. It makes sense, and it will save us money in the long run.
And not to take words out of Commissioner Wincher's mouth, but I distinctly heard him say, is there going to be a cost savings here? And at the end of the day, there is a cost savings.
Yes.
You're not taking the time to do this, you're doing it all at the same time. There is and will be a cost savings, so this is supported by me.
Thank you. And the thought behind this is we will invest this money up front, and hopefully other county departments will find a use for it also. So it won't just be us, but I think it's going to be a good program that we can find many uses.
It's called working together, and I like that.
Absolutely.
Further discussion? Hearing none. Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion passes. Teresa, thank you very, very kindly.
Thanks, Teresa.
Thank you.
I don't know, gentlemen, but that explanation was way better than what Brad did. Do we tell him that or not?
Actually, it was.
I don't know if he's in the mood for that. He's not feeling well.
Sarah, are you going to do public health?
Yes.
Excellent. Why don't you come back up and join us, please?
We have 3 seasonal establishment licenses that have all the fees and all of that has been paid for. We're just looking at your approval of these 3 licenses.
I'll make a motion, Mr. Chair.
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion passes. Sarah, I think that's it for the day. Thank you very
Great
kindly.
job.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Have a
Good
good
job.
afternoon.
Sarah.
And I would like to say that we should take about a 5 or 10-minute break.
I don't think land services here anyway, are they? Is land services good?
All right, gentlemen, it's 10:30. If we could reconvene. And our next item of business is land services. And she's here. They're here.
And so talented.
Good morning.
Good morning, Amy.
Usually chipper mood, I'm suspect. I don't know.
While I have you.
Your attention at the
Good
very
morning.
Good
All
morning.
right, I have, there's 3 items for land services, but the first one is the 2 items that were coming from the Planning Commission. The first one is a rezone consideration, and that is to rezone a property owned by Probar Properties, and that would go from agriculture to commercial, and for the purpose of commercial development, and what's identified as indoor and outdoor storage, and 3 to 4 office spaces. This was recommended for denial by the Planning Commission, so that's the first one for your consideration today.
I'll make a motion
Second.
to approve the denial.
Thank you. Thank you. And is that the second? Discussion? Hearing none. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion passes.
All right, thank you. And then the next item is to consider the approval, as recommended by the Planning Commission, of a conditional use permit request from Patrick Przinski, and that's to expand an existing campground with the addition of 7 more RV campsites. And then there were some conditions, also 7 conditions. Abide by local and state law, maintain a set of campground rules that addresses at a minimum quiet time, emergency and storm procedures, firewood, fireworks, and pets. Rules must be provided to campers at check-in. Solid waste must be removed by a licensed solid waste hauler, and prohibition of burning of garbage within fire rings. Maintain a current certificate of compliance for the septic system serving the campground. Tenants' placement of structures requiring a land use permit, such as storage buildings and decks, must obtain the necessary permits from the Land Services Department. Overflow parking shall not take place within the right-of-way of County Road 212 or Fish Lake Drive, and the property owner shall provide aquatic invasive species educational information to campers.
I'll make a motion to approve, Mr. Chair.
Look for a second. We've got a motion and a second. Discussion?
I just got a question. Are these common conditions that are set upon campgrounds?
We don't have very many campgrounds, to be honest. We don't permit a lot of them, but the ones that have expanded, the resorts that have expanded or the campgrounds, these are very similar. And that has been based on some of the public comment that we've received with concerns about the noise and fireworks and pet control. So they're in, and then they're somewhat in line with the state park system and some of their rules.
Right, because it just seems that we're a babysitter are at times requiring certain things that I don't think are necessary. And telling people about quiet time at a campground, I think the guy who owns the campground, he should be able to do with it what he thinks or what he wants to do with it.
Yeah, I remember when this first came up, we did get comment from the neighbor, the neighbor immediately next door, with concern about that. So that was a carryover condition from the original permit. And then also, this is the county's one and only opportunity to address those things. So if we have issues, we can't reopen a conditional use permit and put on conditions. So these are typical when we have these kinds of requests.
This is actually a pretty new campground.
Yes.
And there actually is a neighbor pretty close.
Yes, right next door.
Yeah.
The question I have, Mr. Chair, Amy, is why is the comprehensive water plan involved when he doesn't even have his campgrounds on the lake?
Because it's still within shoreland, so it's still within 1,000 feet of the lake. And so certainly development on that piece of property can impact the water quality of that lake.
And I have another question, if you will. If overflow parking is not allowed on 212 or on Fish Lake Drive, which I certainly support, it shouldn't be parked there, where would overflow parking go?
In the plan, he did designate he does have a parking area.
Okay.
On top of where you just pull into your site. There's also an area he has designated for parking on
Perfect.
site.
Thank you. Further discussion? Hearing none. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion
All
passes.
right, that's all I have, and then I'll have Jean come up for some abatements.
Good morning, Jean.
Good morning, Gene.
I have 7 abatements that are included in your packet.
That was me. Overreaction there. Never mind.
Any questions on the abatements?
Nope. I'll make a motion to approve the abatements.
And I'd look for a second.
I'll second it.
Discussion? Hearing none. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion passes. That was easy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And that's all we have. Thank you.
Outstanding. Thank you all very, very kindly. Next item, and moving right along, is our Veterans Report, and Kathy is here with us today.
Welcome, Kathy.
Morning, Kathy.
Good morning, Kathy.
I just printed off what our projects were about, so I'm just here from Veteran Services I have a resolution. Myself, Todd County, and Cass County are working together to apply for a grant, some funding for veterans projects within our Region 5 area. And so I'm just letting you know what those are, so I just included, it's not proofed very well, so I apologize, I did print the wrong one. But those, we're doing a project in Uppsala, and we're working on a Veterans Memorial Park in the city of Uppsala. We also are working on improving some grave sites that are actually deteriorating and going into the Mississippi in the Motley Staples areas at a cemetery there. And the other project in Cass County is building a storage area facility for adaptive equipment. And that's all I have.
So, Mr. Chair, we have 2 resolutions, is that correct?
One resolution. Yeah, you got an extra one.
I think just one resolution.
One resolution.
One resolution.
Project for jointly applying
It's
to
twice.
the NJPA Innovation Fund.
It's just one.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Discussion, gentlemen. Go Veterans.
All right, have a good day, everyone.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes.
week,
Thank you
Kathy.
very,
Thank
very
you.
kindly.
Thanks, Kathy.
The next item of business is the auditor's report.
That would be me today.
That's you today.
All right. But,
Many faces of different
Well,
departments, but
yes.
it's working together. I like
go
it.
with the flow and do what we got to do to get the work done, don't we?
Absolutely.
The inclusion of the cash report as usual.
Yep.
And there's no action item required for that. As there always are, warrants to approve. Mr. Chair, those were sent out late last week, and you had time to review, and looking for a roll call vote for those.
Motion to pay all the bills.
Second.
With a motion and a second, discussion on paying the bills. Hearing none. Those in favor?
Roll call, but that would be.
Excuse me,
yes.
thank you.
Yep, mhm.
Thank you. Always get that. Roll call vote. Commissioner Lemire.
Aye.
Commissioner Wilson.
Aye.
Commissioner Blaine.
Aye.
Commissioner Wincher.
Aye.
And myself is an aye. That passes. And I think we can now move right along to, Mr. Bukowski is here. Good morning, Steve. Our Public Works report.
Hi.
Morning, Steve.
Morning, Steve.
Morning, Steve.
He can have that.
There are 2 action items in your packet today. The first being a project that we've been working on for the last couple of years with Pierce Township. It is kind of it is a major county project that we will be funding with our county levy this year. It is the connection between our County Road 239 and County Road 252, just on the outside edge of Pierce. We solicited proposals, and the abstract of bids was included in your packet. We had 4 contractors vying for this project, and the low bidder coming in at $642,930 and a nickel, being Marvin Treader Incorporated. Our recommendation to the board is that we would build this project and that the board would adopt the resolution and award the project to Marvin Treader Incorporated.
I would look for a motion.
So move.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Discussion. Hearing none. Those in favor? Excuse me. Thank you. Another roll call vote. Commissioner Wincher.
Aye.
Commissioner Wilson.
Aye.
Lemire.
Aye.
Blaine.
Aye.
Myself is aye. That motion passes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, the second item on the agenda for your consideration is a resolution to submit an application for regional park designation to the Greater Minnesota Parks and Trails Commission. This resolution applies to Belle Prairie Park. We probably started on this a little over 2 years ago, where in order to obtain access to legacy funds that were earmarked for improvements to regional parks throughout the state, we needed to become designated as a regional park. We had submitted all the parks that fall under our park ordinance in the county. After preliminary evaluation by the commission, the only one that they came back that may have a probability of being designated was Belle Prairie Park. And so then in early 2017, we formed a committee to develop and work with the consultant for our master plan. Commissioner Jelinski and Commissioner Wilson represented the county board on that committee. We spent several months working through taking input from anybody who wanted to provide input and developed the master plan, which then was taken, and the application that was presented in the packet and also you received a hard copy of was put together based on that master plan. So this resolution now will allow us then to submit it to the Greater Minnesota Parks and Trails Commission. If we're successful, then projects that are listed in that plan, we'll be able to make applications and try to get funded to construct those.
I'd look for a motion.
So move.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Discussion. Steve, I have to ask the question. I don't mean to put you on the spot, and I probably have read it, or else I probably have heard it before. How long ago was it that Belle Prairie Park became Belle Prairie Park, or do you know?
You know, it was in the early 70s when the first piece of property was actually acquired by Belle Prairie Township.
Okay.
And they acquired it because there was some discussion that it could potentially be sold off for development. But they didn't have money to do anything with it other than that. And so they came to the county. There were a number of grants that were written, and additional property then was purchased with the grants that the county acquired with the township at that point in time, and eventually it just transferred over to county ownership. But it was in the early 70s that it started.
Do we have an estimate on, and I don't know that we do, an estimate of the usage of that park? I know it's used 365 days a year, virtually, barring a blizzard. Because as soon as the blizzard's done, I know there's people that want to get in there. They exercise in it. They walk through it year-round. But do we have any kind of an estimate other than all the time?
We are utilizing the geofences for determining the park use that had just gone into place.
Okay.
For the first 3 months of this year, we had some preliminary raw data. The Belle Prairie Park had close to 700 users during those 3 early months, and those were many of them we couldn't even get in there because the park wasn't accessible.
Sure.
So that's kind of the first real solid data that we have, and it's. I hope that over the next couple of years we'll be able to provide that to you better.
Excellent.
If I may, Mr. Chair, Steve, do we open that now kind of in the wintertime, or don't we do that?
We haven't, but based on our conversations earlier this year, we intend this next snow season that we would plow it throughout the season.
Excellent. Further discussion? Hearing none. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion passes. Steve, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks,
That's all I
Steve.
have. Thank
Have
you.
a good week.
That brings us to Ms. Gruber and the administrator's report.
You know, gentlemen, I don't have any type of action items for you. Just continue to know that I forget to turn on my microphone on a regular basis, and that I'm working with the facilities group or the building update. Work continues to move forward on that. We will, I don't know of any major issues or any big change order discussions that we've had in the last few weeks, and so nothing new on that front at this point in time. We are going to talk further about jail surveillance or the camera system in the jail. That's going to be a topic that we move forward on in the next few weeks, and a couple meetings are scheduled in that. It's not included in the scope of the project now, but some DOC changes have prompted that to be on the agenda to talk about. And so we're learning more about that, and you'll be brought in when we have more information for you and a more thorough report for you on that. Otherwise, continue to operate and move forward. Last week and yesterday, Tabitha was nice enough to fill in for me. I had an issue come up last minute, but we did the third grade tours with Lindbergh in Little Falls, and that was nice. It's always good to have the kids come in. We modified slightly, took them up to the historic courthouse this go around. I couldn't do the usual route as we do, but I appreciate everybody's participation in that and help with that. For some reason, they find the sheriff's office far more intriguing and interesting than county administration, but someday maybe that'll change. So we'll see.
Maybe not.
Or maybe not. But that's okay. So it's fun to talk about what we do. I'm proud of what we do, and so are staff. So it's good to bring folks in to see it. And other than the normal course of business, that's it.
Anything for Ms. Gruber? Excellent.
All right.
Thank you. Next item is going to be schedules. And this morning, we're going to start with Commissioner Wincher.
Which dates
And
are
these
we going-
dates are going to be
from when to when?
May 13th through the 26th.
13th. And I just have a question before we start that. Did they cancel the Lake Shamana meeting on the 10th? They were going to update that because they were going to have a motley.
Yes, Todd County couldn't do it. Yeah.
It's up in there, but they haven't officially canceled that meeting yet, have they?
I think they said
don't know.
in
I
an
don't
email
have it.
they weren't going to have it, but I don't know that we have a new date yet
Okay, so that is.
that I recall.
The 10th one is.
Yes.
Right, okay. All right, so on the 15th, we have a planning session at 8:30. I have a Great River Regional Library meeting at 6 o'clock on the 15th. I have TCC at 5 o'clock on Thursday, the 17th. Board on the 22nd. And Soil and Water at 9 o'clock on the 24th. And that's, looks like for me, unless I'm missing something.
Commissioner Lemire.
Yellow Ribbon Committee on the 14th, 5:30. Yes. Community Health Needs Assessment, 21st at 11:30 at St. Gabriel's Hospital. I gotta go back now. Randall, I'm gonna go to Randall City Council meeting on the 15th at 7 p.m. And that's it.
Commissioner Wilson.
A second here. I got community development at 12:15 on the 15th. I've got the airport commission on the 17th at noon. And everything else has been covered.
Commissioner Blaine.
Soil and Water. My signature.
Swan River Township has extended an invitation to me and to the rest of the board. They're having a meeting at Swan River Township Hall at 8 o'clock on the 16th with an attorney from the Minnesota Association of Townships to have discussion on the VRBO issue on Stanek Drive. I will be attending that on.
Is that 8 p.m.? 8 p.m.?
8 p.m.
Okay.
Yep. Outside of that, the 24th, I have Region 5 in Staples.
Okay. Is that it?
That is.
Okay, very good.
Mississippi Headwaters that week, 24th of the 25th.
Who's on that?
That's me.
Mike Wilson.
It'll be on the 25th, yes.
And that's at 10 a.m.?
Yes. In Walker.
Okay. As a FYI, on the 14th, Public Health is doing a responsible beverage survey training starting at 1 o'clock. And I think they're having one in the evening also, just as a FYI. On the 16th, I've got Hands of Hope at 5 o'clock at Pine Country Bank. On the 17th at 10 o'clock in the morning, I've got a Armor Owners and Operators meeting in Douglas County in Alexandria. At 7:30 that same evening, I've got an Egg Society meeting, and I believe that's still going to be at the Legion. It might actually be at the fairgrounds, I'm not sure. And the 18th, no, excuse me, I don't have anything on the 18th. On the 21st at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, I've got a Stand Up For You meeting, and that's going to be at the Little Falls Middle School at the library. On the 24th, there's a State Emergency Communications Board meeting at 12:30 in Arden Hills, and that's all I have. And gentlemen, if there's nothing else, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
And a second.
Second.
Second. Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion passes. Thank you very kindly.
Thank you.
10:53.
Are we not?
Not that there is